Does the Premier League's Golden Glove bother anybody else? The award for the league's best goalkeeper is given by who has the most clean sheets. How dumb is that? Clean sheets is a team stat where the best and or most defensive teams are going to have the most every single time. That's not to say that the winners are undeserving. I mean, it's a list of very strong goalkeepers, but that's only natural as the best keepers end up on the best clubs. But clean sheets themselves tell us nothing of a goalkeeper's performance. Because of that, I made a statistic to measure total goalkeeping performance. Now, there's a long explanation for it, so if you want to just skip straight ahead to the ranking, click the time you see on the screen. If you want to hear the intricate explanation, plus give me some watch time, stick around and watch me explain a project I did for an analytics class. Let's get into it. So what stat should you use when comparing goalkeepers? One available stat is save percentage. You can't just use total saves because that is a whole variety of issues. But one issue I have with save percentage is that it doesn't award a goalkeeper for making a big save or punish a goalkeeper for making a big mistake. That's something that post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed does. I'll just be calling it post-shot expected goals from here on forward for brevity. Now, post-shot expected goals tracks how likely a shot is to be scored through expected goals and either awards a goalkeeper for making a save or punishes them for conceding. So, for example, saving a penalty would give a goalkeeper a lot of points, while allowing one wouldn't be that bad. But allowing an easy shot that would punish a goalkeeper while making an easy save, I mean, hey, they just made an easy save, their score barely goes up. Now, it's not a perfect statistic, but it's the best widely available stat that I could find for shot stopping. But when you try to rank goalkeepers by post-shot expected goals, you run into a lot of problems. Remember how I said the best goalkeepers tend to end up on the best teams? Let's take a look at the Big Six plus Newcastle and Aston Villa, their goalkeepers, and see how they rank by post-shot expected goals. At number 2, we don't have number 1 here. At number 2, we have Vicario. I mean, hey, that makes sense. He's been really good for Tottenham this season. I could buy him being the second best goalkeeper in the league. At number 5, we have Onana. I mean, he's quietly been having a pretty good season outside his Champions League blunders. I can see that. At 6, we have Emi Martinez. Again, pretty solid goalkeeper for a team pushing for a Champions League spot. Then at 9, we have Nick Pope, and okay, I guess I can justify that. I mean, he is a great traditional goalkeeper, but he's bad with the ball at his feet, so him being ranked in the middle of the pack, I can understand that. At 10, we have Ederson. Okay, Alisson's not having his best season, but are there really 9 goalkeepers better than him? 13, Ederson. At this point, you just have to throw the stat out the window. Ederson was ranked by several highly respected institutions as the world's best goalkeeper last season. And he's 13th in England? I don't even have to go over how David Raya is 17th on this to explain that this stat just isn't good for ranking goalkeepers. But why isn't it? I think to look at that, we should go to the bottom of the list. At the bottom of the list, there are a lot of goalkeepers who you'd expect to see, goalkeepers who haven't been great this season. You have keepers who have already been replaced due to their poor play, like Wes Foderingham, James Trafford, and Matt Turner. You have a backup in Petrovic, plus Sam Johnstone and Dean Henderson, who have been battling for one spot due to both their poor play, when they're both healthy. But I want to focus on these 3 players, Jason Steele, Bart Verbruggen, and Mark Flecken. 3 players who play for Brighton and Brentford, 2 of the smartest clubs in the Premier League. Brighton have 2 goalkeepers on this list because Steele and Verbruggen have been rotating this season. Not like Henderson and Johnstone where they're battling for a spot, they're actually rotating. Like not just, oh, we have a cup goalkeeper and this guy in the league. No, they are going back and forth who plays depending on the situation, which I feel like I have to mention because it's the first time I've seen a team successfully do that. But tangent aside, Brighton and Brentford are 2 of the most intelligent, data-driven clubs in the world, and they use that to punch well above their financial weight in the Premier League. But I bet if you were to burst in their office and tell them, "Sir, our goalkeepers are below average shot stoppers," their managers would look at you and say, "Yeah, we know." And that is because the position has changed. Goalkeepers are no longer simply shot stoppers. They need to be good with the ball at their feet. Now, there have been goalkeepers who were skilled in possession for a long time, but teams viewed it as a bit of a novelty and something far too risky to attempt during a game. But then, things started to change, especially when Manuel Neuer proved that being a skilled goalkeeper on the ball could work at the highest level, and things really came to a head when Pep Guardiola threw out Joe Hart in 2016. Now, goalkeepers need a wide variety of skills. I'd say there are three main skills that need to be measured when creating a stat for goalkeeper. 1, shot stopping, still the most important thing for a keeper. 2, controlling your area. I'm talking about things like claiming crosses and sweeping. And 3, distribution. How good you are in build-up, how much you can help your team on the ball. But those stats can be very difficult to measure, to quantify. For example, there's no widely available stat for controlling your box at all. But things get really difficult when you look at distribution. Here's one example of the difficulties of quantifying distribution that I ran into. So, in the past, when goalkeepers got the ball, they would typically just crush it, as they didn't have the skill to play in build-up. But as goalkeepers have gotten better with the ball at their feet, not only has pass accuracy gone up, but the average length of pass has gone down, as goalkeepers are crushing the ball a lot less and playing in build-up. So, would the best goalkeepers with the ball at their feet have the shortest average pass length? No, because goalkeepers have gotten so good that some of them can play a really good long pass. But we still have the goalkeepers who just crush it when they get it. So we're now at the point where Ederson, one of, if not the best goalkeepers with the ball at his feet, has the same average pass length as Nick Pope. But after researching for a long time, I found that the best way to measure these skills comes from a site called StatsBomb. Now, unfortunately, they're behind a paywall, so I can't get too much out of this, but they gave a free sample for Ederson last season. They give out a lot of stats, but there are 3 that I'd like to focus on. The first is more of the defensive part of the game, and that's goalkeeper on-ball value, which factors in shot stopping, cross-claiming, and sweeping, which is more off the ball, but whatever. And then in on-ball action, there are 2 stats that I like, which include long ball percentage and pass into danger percentage. Long ball percentage measures how accurate a goalkeeper is at playing the ball long, and pass into danger percentage shows how good a goalkeeper is in build-up and how many mistakes they make. And I really like having 2 of these stats, because goalkeeper passing can do 2 different things. It can help start an attack and be a part of build-up, and I really like how StatsBomb is able to measure both of those skills. However, it is just measuring skills. This doesn't help us build a more comprehensive stat. The question when making a stat to measure total goalkeeping performance is how to weigh those skills, and it can be difficult because different games require different skills. For example, Fraser Forster's performance in this game against Barcelona. Did he really need to do anything on the ball in this game? No, he didn't at all. However, what about Stefan Ortega in this game against Newcastle? Newcastle only had 1 shot on target and Man City scored twice. In theory, at least, he didn't even need to be in goal. So it can be really difficult. However, I still think that traditional goalkeeping elements is the most important part of a goalkeeper's game. Even Man City won't just stick a midfielder in goal. However, I think being skilled with the ball at your feet can be valuable even for teams at the lower end of a Premier League table. It's a really interesting question. My answer to that question actually came from something I mentioned earlier in this video. Brighton rotating keepers. The common wisdom is that Jason Steele's better at the ball with his feet, while Bart Verbruggen is the superior shot stopper. And depending on the game plan, Brighton will change who's in goal. Now, this is an oversimplification, but that gave me an idea. Depending on how much possession a team has, their goalkeeper's distribution stats will be weighed higher or lower. And by the way, I'm not arguing for goalkeepers to be rotated. I think it's actually made Steele and Verbruggen worse this season, and it wouldn't work in 90% of locker rooms due to egos. Now we get to the fun part, the math. Here's the time if you're interested. So basically, if anybody wants a deep dive, let me know in the comments and I'll tell you the exact thing. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking those 3 stats, goalkeeper on-ball value, long ball percentage, and pass into danger percentage, and using them to create 2 other stats, a defensive score and an offensive score. The defensive score comes from goalkeeper on-ball value, and the offensive score comes from the 2 passing stats. And based on how good they are relative to the rest of the league, they'll get an offensive-defensive score from 0 to 50. And then to weigh those 2 scores, I will use a team's possession. If a team has 62.5% possession or above, it is 1-to-1. Then it gets lower and lower, with the defensive score becoming more and more important, all the way down to 37.5% possession. And if a team has 37.5% possession or below, it is 3-to-1 defensive score to offensive score. For an example, here's Ederson in the 22-23 Premier League season. He had a very strong goalkeeper on-ball value, and he got a defensive score of 45. He also had a really good pass and danger percentage and also a strong long ball percentage, and got an offensive score of 44.38. Liverpool had 60.8% possession last season, so his offensive score got a 0.96 multiplier, while his defensive score got a 1.04 multiplier, which means Alisson came out with a total goalkeeper performance of 89.4, which was by far the best in the league. Now, this is great, but as I mentioned before, StatsBomb's behind a paywall, so this information is limited. However, I could reverse engineer their stats and use Alisson as a baseline to make sure I stayed on track, and that's what I did. Now, these skills are still difficult to quantify, and it's not going to be perfect, I am well aware of that, but I think I did a pretty good job. So with that out of the way, let's start with the defensive score. For StatsBomb's goalkeeper on-ball value, they used a combination of shot-stopping, box-controlling, and sweeping metrics, and I'll do the same. For shot-stopping, I'm going to be using post-shot expected goals. For box-controlling, I'm using percentage of crosses faced, claimed, or punched away. And for sweeping, I'm using defensive actions outside the area per 90. They will be weighed 2 to 1 to 1, with shot-stopping being the most important. Now, this is admittedly a bit rough. First, I'm weighing punching a ball away the same as claiming a cross, which I'm not sure about, and in addition, the box controlling and sweeping metrics have the same problem I have with save percentage in relation with post-shot expected goals, and it doesn't account for degree of difficulty. It just measures success or failure, so there's a chance that more erratic goalkeepers could get a pass. Now on to the offensive score. Long ball percentage is easy to replicate as FP reference tracks long ball accuracy, but pass to danger percentage is the part that I feel least comfortable with this entire stat. What I'm doing is combining pass completion percentage and touches per 90 minutes. I'm hoping that pass completion percentage can help show mistakes goalkeepers can make in build-up, while touches per 90 minutes show how involved they are in a game. Now, again, I'm aware that this is rough, and again, this is the part that I feel least comfortable with, but after testing this for a long time, this is the best numbers that I could come up with, and I feel pretty confident in this metric. And with that, our stat is completed. If you watched this whole thing and didn't skip ahead, kudos to you. You might as well like and subscribe at this point, because you clearly want to stick around. But with the explanation out of the way, we can get on to the actual ranking of every Premier League goalkeeper. 25, Dean Henderson. Yeah, as a Palace fan, I'm not too surprised about this one. In fairness to Henderson, he has played the second fewest amount of games out of anybody on this list, so his sample size could hurt him. In addition, he hasn't received a really sustained run of games. He's been battling with Sam Johnston for a spot, so that always hurts goalkeepers as well. And I have always rated his talent, but I'm measuring performance, not talent, and the performance has been bad this season. His offensive score has been abysmal, but that doesn't really affect Palace that much because of their limited possession. But his defensive rating is also bringing him down. He is still somebody who I rate his talent, but I can't deny that his performances have not been good this season. At least Palace have two goalkeepers. 24, Sam Johnston. I swear, I did not set this up. I told you my rationale for these rankings, but again, as a Palace fan, I'm not too surprised. I've always said with Sam Johnston that he's not the most talented goalkeeper, but he makes up with that for consistency. He doesn't make too many mistakes. However, this season he's been making mistakes, so I'm not surprised that his defensive score is the worst in the league, and his offensive score isn't much better either. And this isn't just the Crystal Palace thing. For one, I did the stat for last season as well to double check, and Vicente Guaita was top 10, and there is deviation between goalkeepers and other teams. It's just that Crystal Palace's goalkeepers have not been performing well this season. In fairness to Johnston, I do think he communicates with the back line quite well, and that's something that you really can't measure with any stat, but it's looking bad for Crystal Palace. 23, Georgi Petrovic. Like Henderson, he has a small sample size and had to start playing as a backup, so this might not be the best judge of his talent, but again, I'm measuring performance, and his shot stopping has been very bad this season. However, his passing actually has been pretty good, which might suggest some promise for the future should he get a more sustained run of games, but I think it's about what we'd expect from a backup goalkeeper. 22, Matt Turner. Would you believe his passing brought up his score? Though it's not good enough given his more traditional goalkeeper performance. His defensive score is only better than the three goalkeepers I've already mentioned. One positive for Matt Turner, though, is that he is outperforming his replacement, Matt Sells. Sells didn't play enough games for me to have a good enough sample size for me to feel confident including him on the list, but Turner has been outperforming him, so that is a positive for him. 21, Wes Fodringham. Another goalkeeper has been replaced, and again, his replacement didn't play enough games to qualify for this list. Something interesting with Fodringham is his defensive score is actually pretty respectable. His offensive score is bad, and it does bring him down. Only the Palace goalkeepers and one more are worse. However, that's not what Sheffield United needs, and his replacement hasn't exactly been lighting things on fire. Again, too limited sample size, but it was a negative 57 for IFO. But either way, Fodringham, he might have been replaced, but he's not at fault for Sheffield United's current predicament. 20, Mark Flecken. Flecken is an interesting case. As I mentioned earlier, Brentford is one of the most forward-thinking clubs in the league, and we can see that in Flecken. His offensive score is one of the best in the league. However, his defensive score is not good. But I think Brentford were okay with that when they signed him. They probably expected him to be a bit better keeping the ball at the back of the net, but they signed him for his ability with his feet. However, whether due to injuries or squad deterioration, Brentford haven't been good this season. And they don't need a goalkeeper who's good at playing out of the back. They need a goalkeeper who can keep the ball out of the net. And Flecken hasn't been doing that and has been costing them points this season. When you're fighting relegation, you need a goalkeeper who's good at the more traditional aspects of keeping. Speaking of, 19, James Trafford. Another talented goalkeeper on the wrong team. What I said about Brentford and Flecken could be said about Burnley and Trafford as well. Well, Burnley aren't riddled with injuries, they're just not that good. I really rate Trafford as a goalkeeper, and I see him as England's future number one, but he's a young goalkeeper, and he's making a lot of mistakes defensively, and that's not what you need when you're a team fighting relegation. I hope that Trafford is able to stay in the Premier League and find a club that can get the most out of his talents, but I understand why Burnley replaced him with Muric, who hasn't played enough to feature, but has done pretty well since going in net. 18, Thomas Kaminski. He's done well for Luton, has a very respectable defensive score. His offensive score does weigh him down a bit, but that's not why Luton signed him. He's done fine, and I'm not going to have too many complaints about other goalkeepers moving forward. 17, Areola. Same thing as Kaminski. Very good shot stopper, doesn't add too much on the ball, but that's not what West Ham needs. He's been solid for them. 16, Bernd Leno. The first goalkeeper is about average in both defensive and offensive scores. His defensive score is weighed heavily by his really good shot-stopping metrics, though he's not that good in the air or at sweeping, so I understand why Arsenal moved on for him, but he's been very good for Fulham this season. 15, Jose Sa. The leader in post-shot expected goals and one of the best defensive goalkeepers in the entire league. He has been very good for Gary O'Neill's side. However, his offensive score leaves a lot to be desired, and it might limit his upside. However, that's not what Wolves really needs this season, and I think he's been good. 14, Martin Dubravka. Like Leno, he's rated about average in both offensive and defensive abilities, though his sample size is limited, so that might not be truly accurate. However, considering how poor Petrovic was ranked in this, I don't think Newcastle's going to have any complaints about their backup goalkeeper, even if he isn't Nick Pope. 13, David Raya. Raya is the player I feel the least comfortable in this ranking. His offensive score is far too low given the obvious talent that he does have given the eye test, and his post-shot expected goals does weigh him down. However, one thing that I do want to mention is that his cross-claiming, his box-controlling metrics, are by far the best in the league, and he's doing this through claiming crosses, not just punching them away. And Arsenal have been very good at attacking set pieces this season, so I wonder if this is something that they were looking for. And maybe that they weighed box controlling a lot more highly than I did. However, David Raya hasn't been superb this season, and while I think he's done a bit dirty at being 13th, not by that much, and we'll have to see if Arsenal end up keeping him next season. 12, Jason Steele. Steele is the first goalkeeper to really benefit from a high offensive score, and he's just about what you'd expect. Really good with the ball at his feet, bad as a more traditional goalkeeper. One thing that I do like to mention is that his sweeping is very good, and maybe that's something to do with why him and Verbruggen have been rotated so much. I'm sure that in the long term, Brighton want to have a better shot stopper, but Steele has done his job this season, has been good for them. 11, Neto. Kind of the opposite of Jason Steele. He is the second to last goalkeeper carried by a good defensive score. His shot stopping and aerial ability has been very strong this season, though he is one of the punchiest goalkeepers in the league, so keep that in mind when talking about his aerial skills. His poor offensive score may suggest that Iraola could replace him as Bournemouth become a more attacking side, though I don't think he could have any complaints about Neto's performance this season. 10. Jordan Pickford. Like with Flecken and Trafford, I feel like Pickford's on-ball skills are kind of wasted at a defensive Everton team. However, unlike Flecken and Trafford, Pickford's a good traditional goalkeeper and has done a great job for Everton this season. Though, with how Everton play, I think they could probably afford to lose Jordan Pickford and replace him with a goalkeeper who's not good with the ball at his feet, but a good shot stopper. And, if anything, just to help balance the books and get them out of financial trouble. Though, this season, Pickford's done a very good job at keeping Everton above the relegation zone. 9. Andre Onana. Good defensive rating, bad offensive rating. Kind of the opposite of what you'd expect at the beginning of the season. I mean, he was brought into Manchester United to replace De Gea due to his skill with the ball at his feet, and he made several high-profile errors in the Champions League that made people really question his shot-stopping. However, he recovered his form as a shot-stopper, and he's never been a bad defensive goalkeeper, just had some bad moments. However, on the ball, things have been pretty weird. I think that's because Manchester United are not that good this season and have been very defensive. Kind of like Jordan Pickford, I feel like his talents might be a bit wasted under Erik ten Hag. Hopefully for Onana, a new manager will come in and help get the best out of his skills, but right now, they're not getting the best out of his abilities. 8. Robert Sanchez. Sanchez is just above the middle of the pack with his defensive rating, though his offensive score is very high and brings him up. Though Chelsea fans haven't been too high on him, I know a lot of them actually want Petrovic to replace him, which they shouldn't. But Sanchez is the 8th best goalkeeper in the league for a team that's in 9th. We'll have to see where Chelsea's ambitions are at, but I think for right now we can say that Sanchez isn't one of Chelsea's biggest problems. 7. Alisson. As I mentioned before, Alisson has been having a bit of an off year. He's been dealing with injuries that I feel like have been negatively affecting his play. But despite that, he's still rated 7th. His on-ball ability has been really carrying him this season, as his shot-stopping has only been about average this year. However, last season, he was by far the best in the league by my metric. Nobody this year comes close to what he was doing last season, and we have to keep that in mind when talking about his bad performance this season, which I feel like is caused a bit by injuries. However, even through the eye test, I think it's clear that Alisson has been off this season compared to last year, and due to reasons you'll soon see, their new manager might have a tough choice to make. 6. Nick Pope. Pope finishing 6th really made me feel confident in this metric. Despite a bad offensive score, his really good defensive score plus Newcastle not dominating the ball let his rating still be high. He's a very strong traditional goalkeeper, and I've heard Newcastle fans talk a lot about how he misses sweeping with him out injured. His offensive score is still bad. It's honestly probably better than it deserves to be, but I'm glad that Pope can still be 6th, and I think it's the right spot for him. 5. Kelleher. Rated above Alisson. Interesting. One caveat that I do have to say is that Kelleher has played the least amount of games out of anybody on this list, so the sample size is small and things could change kind of quickly, but it's still impressive. His defensive score is very high, carried by a really good shot-stopping rating, and his offensive score is pretty good as well. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that he is a better goalkeeper than Alisson. Alisson's been dealing with injuries this season, and Kelleher, small sample size. However, I think we do have to take note of how good Kelleher has been, and the fact that he's 6 years younger than Alisson. The next Liverpool manager is going to have a tough decision to make. 4. Vicario. Tottenham found a great number 1. The second best defensive keeper in the league, he is great at keeping the ball at the back of the net, and he's not bad on the ball either. Ange Postecoglou demands a lot of his goalkeepers distribution-wise, and Vicario has passed the test. He might not be Ederson or anything on the ball, but he is very good, and I could see him becoming the Premier League's number 1 goalkeeper in the near future. 3. Bart Verbruggen. Like how Raya was undervalued by this ranking, I feel like Verbruggen might be the most overvalued, though when I dig into it deeper, I'm not sure if it's by much. He's a very young and promising goalkeeper. His defensive score is actually below average, which I think has been hurt a bit by Brighton rotating goalkeepers this season and him not getting consistent playing time. He was actually a good shot stopper in Belgium last year. But his offensive score is the best in the league. His long passing is the best in the league, and his short passing is actually ahead of Jason Steele by my metrics. Now, again, he does make some mistakes that might not be accounted for by this stat, but even putting those aside, I think he'd probably still be top 5. I think Brighton found another star. 2. Ederson. Now this is where you'd expect Ederson to be. Not the greatest shot stopper, but a solid all-around defensive goalkeeper due to his aerial ability and sweeping skills. However, his on-ball skills is what really separates him from the rest of the goalkeepers, and due to Man City's heavy possession, he gets the full weight of his offensive score. I'm really glad that this metric is able to recognize Ederson's talents while other stats just don't. But he's still not number 1. 1. Emi Martinez. I remember when Martinez won the Yashin Trophy, the award for the world's best goalkeeper. I felt like it was undeserved, that he only won it due to that save at the World Cup, plus his performances and penalties. But it might have been deserved after all. He had by far the best defensive score out of any goalkeeper in the Premier League. His sweeping, his box controlling, his shot stopping were all top tier, and his offensive score wasn't bad either. It's not the level of Alisson or Ederson, but it was still good, well above average. He's been a big part of Aston Villa pushing for a Champions League spot this season, and I believe he's rightfully looked at as one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And there we have it, my ranking of every goalkeeper in the Premier League through statistics that I made. This took a long time, so if you enjoyed it, please give the video a like and subscribe. And let me know if you enjoyed this. If this video does well, I might do a best goalkeepers in the world video, because now that I have the formula, it should be pretty easy to make this again. With that, thank you for watching. See ya.